Mr. Musk, she said, her voice soft but serious, I have a question for you. Elon Musk was visiting a small hospital to meet with the doctors and patients. He often did this as part of his charity work, but this time he didn't expect to be stopped by a little girl. He smiled, thinking it would be something light-hearted. Sure, he said, his voice warm without hesitation. The girl asked, "What do you think happens when we die?" Elon was taken aback. This was not what he expected from a little girl. He tried to hide his surprise, but it was hard. The question was deep, and it made him pause. He looked at her innocent face, wondering how such a young child could have such a serious question. But there was no turning back now. He had to answer. Elon thought for a moment. He had dealt with rockets, artificial intelligence, and electric cars, but never a question like this from a child. He had always believed in science, in logic, in things that could be measured, but this question touched something deeper inside him. He looked into the little girl's eyes. "That's a very big question," he said slowly. "You know, I don't have all the answers, but here's what I think." He paused again, trying to find the right words. The room felt quieter. The other people in the room had stopped talking now, listening in on their conversation. The little girl was waiting patiently, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. "You see," Elon continued, "there are many things in this world that we don't fully understand, yet science helps us learn about the universe, about stars and planets, but there are still mysteries we don't have answers for." He shifted his weight, thinking about his next words carefully. Could he answer this question in a way that made sense? He looked at the girl again, her eyes wide and expectant, as though she was waiting for something magical. "Maybe," he said slowly, "we don't really know what happens when we die. But one thing I believe is that the world we live in, this beautiful earth, is full of wonder, and I think in a way that's a part of something bigger." The girl's eyes narrowed a little, trying to understand. She wasn't satisfied with just that answer. There was more on her mind. "Are you saying that when we die, we just go back to being a part of the stars?" she asked, tilting her head. Her voice had a touch of uncertainty, but it was clear that she wasn't done asking. Elon didn't know how to respond at first. He had never really thought of it that way. The question was too big for him to answer in a simple sentence. He scratched his chin, feeling a weight on his shoulders. He knew the importance of his words. Was he ready for this conversation? He had built companies that changed the world, but this question was different. It wasn't about technology or business. It was about something that touched the soul. "I don't know," Elon said, finally shaking his head. "But maybe we don't need to know everything right away. Maybe it's okay not to have all the answers." The little girl looked at him for a long moment, processing his words. She then spoke again, her voice quieter this time, but with a depth that made Elon feel something stir inside him. "But what if there is a God?" she asked softly, her eyes searching his face for an answer. Elon's heart skipped a beat. God? It wasn't a question he expected to be asked, and it made him feel a strange mix of emotions. This little girl had just asked the question that everyone else was too afraid to ask. He took a deep breath. He had been raised in a world of logic, of innovation, of cold, hard facts. But this question was warm, and it felt like it came from somewhere deep in the heart. "I think," Elon began, choosing his words carefully, "that everyone believes different things. Some people believe in God, others believe in science, and some try to blend both. But no matter what I think, that having faith in something bigger than ourselves can give us hope." The girl's face lit up slightly. She wasn't expecting that answer, but it was enough to make her think. "But what if God isn't real?" she asked, almost afraid to ask, her voice trembling. Elon paused again. This was becoming harder than he thought. Could he give her an answer that would make her feel better? "I don't know if I can answer that for you," he said honestly, "but I think it's okay to ask those questions, and maybe that's the first step to finding the answers you're looking for." The little girl sat quietly for a moment, her small hands clasped tightly in her lap. Elon wondered if he had said the right thing. He could see the wheels turning in her head, but he also saw a hint of sadness in her eyes. "You know, I've always wondered if God is real," the little girl said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But sometimes I'm scared. What if I never find out?" Elon felt his heart ache. He couldn't help but see the fear in her words. It was the same fear that many adults had, the fear of uncertainty, of the unknown. Could he help her find peace? He bent down closer to her, looking into her eyes with warmth and understanding standing it's okay to be scared, he said softly, "But remember, you're never alone. There are people who care about you, and there's always something to believe in, even when you're unsure. It's okay to keep looking for answers." The little girl looked up at him, her eyes full of emotion for a moment. It seemed as though the world had stopped. Then she slowly began to cry. Elon was taken aback by the tears. He didn't know what to do. At first, he wasn't used to seeing children cry, especially after a conversation like this. But he realized that the little girl had been holding in a lot of emotions, and his words had touched something deep inside her. He reached out, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. "Hey," he said softly, "it's okay to cry sometimes. We all need a little release, but remember, you don't have to have all the answers today. You can keep asking questions. And that's what's important." She nodded through her tears, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. The moment felt like it was stretching on forever, but somehow Elon knew that this was one of the most meaningful moments he had ever experienced. As the little girl wiped away her tears, Elon stood there feeling a strange sense of peace. It was as though the conversation had changed something in him. He wasn't just a man of science and technology anymore. He was a man who had just witnessed the raw, vulnerable side of humanity. "Thank you for asking me that," Elon said softly. "I may not have all the answers, but you've made me think in ways I never did before." The little girl smiled weakly, looking up at him with a new understanding in her eyes. She didn't have all the answers either, but for the first time she felt okay with that. Elon turned to walk away, but as he did, he looked back one last time. The little girl was still sitting there, lost in thought, but now there was a sense of peace in her face. Sometimes the simplest questions could change everything, and for Elon, this moment would stay with him forever. The quiet hum of the hospital filled the air as Elon walked down the hallway. The small girl's question echoed in his mind, lingering in a way he hadn't expected. He had answered her as best he could, but somehow it didn't feel like enough. Was it enough? Had he said the right things? He couldn't shake the feeling that he had missed something important. As he made his way toward the elevator, he thought about his life, his companies, his vision, the future he worked so hard to create. But in the midst of all that ambition and innovation, had he forgotten something more important? What if that little girl was asking for more than just answers? What if she needed reassurance, comfort, and hope? What if we all did? He thought about his childhood, how he had always been the curious one, constantly questioning everything. He had never been afraid to ask why, even when the answers didn't make sense. And yet, when it came to something as profound as life, death, and God, he felt like he was walking in the dark. His mind wandered back to the conversation. He wondered if there was something more to explore there. He had talked about science and the universe, but what about faith? Could science and faith coexist? The following days passed, and Elon couldn't shake the memory of the little girl's face. It seemed like a small fleeting moment, but it felt much more significant to him. He began to think about the question she had asked about God, about life after death. For the first time in a long while, Elon found himself searching for answers, but not the kind of answers he usually sought. This wasn't about technology or the future of humanity. It was about the bigger picture. He spent evenings reading books about faith, philosophy, and the mysteries of existence. He spoke to friends and colleagues who believed in different things, hoping to understand their perspectives. Each conversation opened new doors, but none of them felt like a full answer. It was like trying to solve a puzzle with pieces that didn't quite fit together. But as time passed, something began to change inside him. He started to see a pattern. Maybe the answer wasn't about having everything figured out. Maybe it was about accepting that there were things beyond human understanding. Maybe it was about learning to live with uncertainty. One night, as he sat on his balcony, staring at the stars, Elon felt a strange peace wash over him. Perhaps the answer wasn't as important as the question itself. Perhaps the act of searching for meaning, for truth, was just as valuable as the truth itself. It was several weeks after his encounter with the girl when Elon found himself at dinner party. The event was filled with some of the most brilliant minds in the world, scientists, engineers, entrepreneurs, and philosophers. They gathered to discuss everything from space exploration to artificial intelligence. But as the night wore on, the conversation shifted toward the nature of universe, and surprisingly faith. As the discussion grew deeper, Elon remained quiet, listening intently. He had heard arguments from both sides. Some believed in the power of science, while others had a strong belief in a higher power. But there was one person, an elderly woman, sitting across from him, who hadn't spoken yet. Her eyes were kind, and there was a wisdom in her gaze that seemed to hold more knowledge than words could express. Finally, she turned to Elon and said, "What do you think, Mr. Musk? You've built rockets, reached for the stars, but what do you believe when you look up at the night sky?" Elon hesitated for a moment, surprised by the question. It wasn't just a question about technology. It was a question about something much more personal. He thought about the little girl, and the questions she had asked. He thought about his search for answers. Could he answer her the way he had answered? "Girl, I think," he began slowly, "I think the universe is full of MEs, and as much as we try to understand everything, there's always something beyond our grasp. Maybe that's the beauty of it, the mystery itself." The woman nodded thoughtfully. "And do you think that mystery is a sign of something bigger?" Elon looked up at the sky, deep in thought. "Maybe I think it's possible that there is something beyond what we can see, something that connects us all. I don't have all the answers, but I think it's okay not to. Maybe the search itself is what matters." The woman smiled warmly, as though she had known the answer all along. "The search is everything," she said softly, "and sometimes it's the questions that bring us closer to understanding." A few months later, Elon found himself at the same hospital again. He had come to visit a friend, but as he walked through the hallway, he felt something tugging at his heart. He remembered the little girl, the one who had asked him about God. He wondered if she was still there. He made his way to the waiting room, and sure enough, he saw her sitting in the same spot. She was older now, maybe by a year, but she still had that same curious expression. This time she noticed him right away and stood up, walking toward him with a smile. "Mr. Musk," she said, her voice filled with excitement. "You came back." Elon smiled warmly, crouching down to her level. "I couldn't stay away," he said, his voice gentle. "I've been thinking a lot about our conversation." The girl's eyes lit up. "Really? About what happens when we die?" Elon nodded. "Yes, and about everything you asked me. I've been searching for answers, but I've realized something important." The girl looked up at him with curiosity. "What did you realize?" "I realize that sometimes it's okay not to have all the answers," Elon said, "but the search for meaning, the asking of questions, that's what matters most. It's a journey we're all on, and it's one that connects us all." The little girl smiled, her face filled with a quiet understanding. Maybe she didn't have all the answers either, but that was okay. She had come to understand that asking the right questions, seeking truth, and keeping an open heart were the most important things. Elon stood up, looking at her one last time. "Keep asking, okay, keep searching for what feels right." The little girl nodded. "I will. Thank you, Mr. Musk." And as Elon turned to leave, he felt a sense of peace that he hadn't felt before. Sometimes the most profound answers don't come from the answers themselves. They come from the questions we ask and the way we search for truth. From that day forward, Elon Musk's perspective on life began to shift. He continued to chase his dreams, to push the boundaries of space exploration and innovation, but he also became more open to the mysteries of the world, those that couldn't be explained by science alone. He realized that sometimes faith and curiosity could coexist, and though he didn't have all the answers, he was okay with that. He had learned that the search for meaning was just as important as the destination. As for the little girl, she continued to grow, always asking questions, always seeking answers. She knew that life wasn't about having everything figured out. It was about learning, growing, and understanding that the search for truth was a journey that could last a lifetime. And Elon Musk knew deep down that in a way the little girl had given him the answers he needed all along. As Elon continued his journey of discovery, He found himself sharing his thoughts more openly with others, whether they were colleagues, friends, or strangers. The questions the little girl had asked lingered in his mind, often surfacing in conversations and quiet moments of reflection. He had realized that seeking answers wasn't about finding certainty, but about embracing the unknown with humility and curiosity. In a world so focused on solving problems, perhaps the biggest lesson was to simply keep wondering. One evening, as he looked up at the stars once more, he felt an overwhelming sense of connection, not just to the vastness of space, but to the lives he touched, the questions asked, and the answers that could never truly be fully known in that moment. Elon understood something profound. No matter how far humanity reached, the search for meaning was a thread that wove them all together across time and space, and sometimes the most important discoveries didn't happen in a lab or on a rocket, but in the quiet moments of introspection. Years later, Elon would often think back to that little girl with the big question. He never saw her again, but he carried her words in his heart. Her simple curiosity had sparked a change in him, and in a way she had shown him the importance of embracing faith alongside his work. She had reminded him that there was more to life than progress and success. It was about connection, belief, and understanding the mysteries that kept us searching.